Welcome back to tutorials on Adobe Lightroom Classic. Previous tutorial we reviewed how to import, name, and organize your pictures as you're bringing them in. Now I am ready to develop our portrait. Right? There's going to be a lot of steps here. It can be very intricate. Biggest takeaway I want you to get from this is to not overdo it. A lot of beginners want to overdo it, that kind of overbrushed magazine kind of fake look. So our goal is to make our subjects look as natural as possible. And again, I want to thank our amazing subject here. Student was very kind to let me embarrass her and use her photo in these sets of tutorials. So thank you very much. Alright, so I'm in the develop module, right? So I picked the picture that I want to start with to develop. There's nothing done to it except for what I added in during the presets, okay? And I like to see as much of the image as possible while I'm processing. So I don't want all of these left, right, bottom, all these side panels open. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Shift and Tab, and it's going to hide the panels and give us more of our subject. I do want the panel on the right back, so I'm going to click over there on that little arrow, and we want to have our tools kind of panel open here. Also, you'll notice that I am working in solo mode over here, so these are little dotted circles instead of a solid color. I simply held Option when I clicked on it. That keeps it a simpler interface for me. We're going to pay attention to our histogram here. We got a pretty decent spread. We're missing a little bit here, but we're not quite hitting the blacks and we're not quite hitting the right, so we'll fix that. We'll expand our tonal range, but first things first, let's open up the basics panel here. And before we do any local adjustments, which is going to be something new in these tutorials, we're going to do our global adjustments. And you'll notice my profile says camera neutral instead of Adobe RGB or Adobe Color. That was part of my preset options. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set my white balance. Hopefully you did a good job of setting it in camera, but just to make sure, I'm going to take the white balance selector, and we would look for something neutral if our subject was wearing a white shirt. You may come in maybe around the whites of the eyes, finding something like that's actually not too bad. Say neutral color, you can see with the loop open that the RGB numbers in the bottom are all very close to each other. You can also maybe pick kind of a brighter color in this range. Your photo is going to be different, but I'm going to go with kind of the whites of the eyes here, something like that to where it's close. Now I'm looking at this and it made the temperature kind of blue. She's in the shade, made the temperature kind of blue. So I'm looking at my slider here, and to the left is cooler colors, which is blue. To the right we can make the image warmer, which adds a little yellow. So I want this image to be warmer. Even though the selector tool picked that, I'm going to come back and I'm going to warm this image up. I'm going to do it by eye, and I like, it was a sunny day and I like the kind of orange in her sweater, so I want to have warmer oranger skin tone, so I'm going to go about 6,000. Now we also have the tint here based on your lens, camera, lighting, stuff like that. To the left is more green, to the right is more magenta. So we go right, you can see we're getting pink. We go left, you can see we're getting green. So I'm going to come in and just kind of eyeball this again, and I don't want her too pink, so I'm going to go around maybe +8 for right now. So we set our white balance. We're kind of paying attention mostly to the skin tone, getting it to look natural, and we're going to next come up here and we're going to crop. Alright, so I'm going to turn on the crop overlay, and we want to change our aspect from original to a classic 4x5 or 8x10 portrait. The other thing I want to do is, right now we're in landscape where we've shot this photo more kind of wide. I want to do a traditional portrait orientation, so I'm going to flip from horizontal to vertical with the X key on the keyboard, and you can see that now we have more of a vertical and traditional portrait. I like how this was shot in the shade. Good thinking on that, because it was a super bright day when we went out. And Delaney gave us a little extra headroom, which is good, right? We can crop in post like we're about to do. Remember that we want to try to have our subject's eyes on about the upper third. So I'm going to come up here, I'm going to hold shift, and I'm going to proportionally kind of drag down just so we have a little bit of headroom and these eyes are about on the third. And I'm going to position it like this, so this eye is about on that intersecting point. I know I'm cutting off the shoulder and stuff here, and maybe that's a little too much. Maybe I will come over this way. I think that'd be okay. And we're giving this a look room over here, right? She's looking this way. We have more open area there, which is something typically we want to do. And this is non-destructive, so I'm going to hit return. And if I don't like it, and I think maybe I'm off to the right a little too much, I might actually kind of bring it back more like that. There we go. I like that a little bit more, having some space over here, but still a little more in the look room. It's up to you on the crop, but 8x10, try to get the eyes on that or near that upper third. Now we want to work on our tonal distribution. You'll notice that we shot in the shade, so there's not a lot of white. So we're over here, and our histogram is bunched up in the shadows and the midtones because we cropped out all of these kind of whites over here. But we want to kind of spread this out a little bit more, get a little more dynamic range, a little more tonal range. So let's come down to the whites down here in the basic slider. I'm going to hold the option key, and I'm going to drag the whites to the right. All right, until I see clipping. Right, clipping means that it's going to be so white there'll be no detail in that area, and I don't want that. So I'm going to back off a little bit until I see nothing on the black screen. I'm going to let go. Now that's pulled our histogram all the way to the white, so something in this area probably is true white. I'm going to do the same thing with blacks. I'm going to hold option, and I'm going to drag this to the left. Now with blacks, we do typically don't mind having a little bit of clipping, all right? The shadows could be pure black. Now we don't want to lose detail on the face or anything like that, so I'm going to pull it back a little bit. But if I have a little bit of clipping in the blacks in the shadow area like that, I am okay with that in this particular instance. I like to have a little bit on the blacks. Now, once you've done this, you can, of course, I'm going to make sure that's -28, which I like. I can adjust, left or right and kind of eyeball it visually, but I'm going to stick with that. We can also from here adjust highlights and shadows a little bit. So if we bring our highlights to the left in this particular instance, we're going to see what happens in the background and how it affects maybe some of the detail in our hair. I'm actually going to pull those up just a little bit, or actually quite a lot. I want to see a little bit of that texture back there. And then on our shadows, right, I'm going to bring that typically to the right a little bit. We're just eyeballing, we're looking at the skin tone, we're looking for some good contrast on there. I'm not going to touch clarity or dehaze. We're going to do some clarity in the local adjustments. Right now we're focusing on global adjustments. Global adjustments is we're affecting the whole picture, right? So our clarity on that we're going to keep. But I do like vibrance, and I'm going to begin by having Lightroom guess on the vibrance. So I'm going to hold shift, and I'm going to double click on the little teardrop, and it added 18 for the vibrance, which is fine by me. I usually let Lightroom pick on that. Sometimes it goes a little too much. I might pull it back. I typically don't do saturation. I like how vibrance is a little more subtle. I may sometimes bring saturation down a little bit, not down that much, but sometimes down a little bit on a portrait just to help with the retouching later. But that's kind of up to you. You don't want to take out too much of the color. Then we can come into our tone curve, all right, and add a little more contrast. I actually like how our subject's looking right now. If we hit the backslash key right? That is before, and you notice how our subject's fairly flat. And then because we've added that, increased that tonal range, right? We've increased that contrast before, after. We've warmed it up, did a lot of cool stuff. Now we can come here under our tone curve, and I'm going to hold Option, and I'm going to click and create our tone curve here. I'm going to do a very subtle, maybe a little more contrast, bring the highlights down, the shadows down just a little bit, right? We get too much, gets out of control. So I'm just going to bring it down just slightly, bring our highlights up just a little bit, all right? Again, not too much, just a little bit, kind of a standard kind of S curve like that. We can turn it on and off, and I think we might have even gotten too dark here, so I'm going to bring that up just a little bit more on the highlights, and it's more of a season to taste, all right? And I just wanted to create a little bit more contrast. Another popular technique is that traditional film look, right, before digital, where things were analog, where there's no pure black or no pure white, kind of a matte look. And we could do that, right? Here, I can bring our blacks up, and you can see we're going to lose a little detail when I do that, but I can bring that up a little more, kind of a film look, and I can bring the whites down. So now nothing's pure black, it's a little bit of gray, and then nothing's pure white. I have also set this as a preset, so I'm just going to use my preset I've had before. I think that makes it too dark, so I'm actually going to go undo and leave it how I have it. So we have before and after. I think it might be a little moody right now, so I'm going to do the tone curve. It got a little dark after we did those adjustments, so I'm going to come up on my exposure, and I'm going to bring my exposure up a little bit. So after that tone curve, I think it got a little too moody, a little too dark, so I'm increasing my exposure. Backslash, you can see before and after. So that gives us, oh, wait, no, we're not quite done yet. Let me see. We're going to do, under details, let's do some sharpening. All right, so we're going to sharpen. I'm going to bring sharpening up, I don't know, maybe around 60 or so for portraits. But we don't want to sharpen all the skin necessarily, but around the edge of the eyes, lips, stuff like that. So I'm going to hold Option on the radius, and I'm going to drag this to the right. And if you notice, whoops, holding Option and dragging it, I can't show you on the left, but look on the left, and you see around her left cheekbone where there's kind of that white halo. That's too much when you start to see the white halo. So I'm going to bring it back until we see that sharp line and just a little bit of halo around the eyes, the nose, and that left side. And then I'm going to let go. Then I'm going to hold Option on masking. I don't want masking at 0. I don't want to sharpen everything. I want to pull this back so that as I'm sliding to the right and I'm holding Option, the black areas don't get sharpened, the white areas do. And I don't want too much sharpening on the skin. I want it around the edges, so I'm pulling mine all the way back to about 80. And you can see white lines around the eyes, the lips, nostrils, cheekbones, and I'm going to do that for sharpening. There we go. You can come in and also, well, we'll save some of the other effects till later. Right now we can zoom in, right, and do before and after. We can also hit the white key, the Y on the keyboard, right, before and after, all right. And then I can come back and do that. So now we have global adjustment. Got a good starting point here. What I'm going to do with this starting point, I'm going to show you one of the powerful features of Lightroom, which is the ability to use presets or to copy developed settings across multiple photos. So I'm going to scroll down here to the right so that my little thumbnail strip pops up. I'm going to right click on the image we're processing, and I'm going to go to develop settings and click on copy settings. So Develop settings are all the stuff that we just did, and we want to copy those to the other images that are in the same location with similar lighting. So I'm going to hit copy settings. I'm going to check none, or actually let's do check all, and let's turn some things off. We don't want to cover or bring over our crop settings because every image is different. We haven't done spot removal yet. Every image transform is different, so turn that off. We're not going to do effects. We'll keep lens correction. We'll keep color. We haven't done color, split toning, or any of this, but we can leave them checked. And sharpening, dehaze, tone curve, and white balance. We could do all of those settings, right? Transform is like straightening it. Every image was taken different, so don't worry about that. Spot removals we haven't covered. Crop, every image is shot different. Local adjustments we're going to do next. So I'm going to copy those. Now I'm going to click. I'm not going to worry about the black one that we're discarding. I'm going to shift click to highlight all of these. These were shot in a similar location under similar lighting. However, the one we just did was in the shadows, so it's a little different, but this will give us a good starting point. So I'm going to right click, develop settings, and in this instance I'm going to paste settings, and it's going to give us a good starting point, right? This one, it blew a bunch of stuff out. It's overexposed, so I'd go back and fix that one individually, right? All that type of stuff. You can see they are way more overexposed because these were shot in more light and less shade. So I might actually in this case undo that so that I would process these on their own. So let me undo a little bit. All right, I'm actually going to undo those just because the one I did was in so much shadow, the lighting was so different, it actually didn't work to paste the settings. If we were to shoot these in a portrait where lighting was controlled, that really saves a bunch of time. All right, so that gives us our global adjustment. Let's go back here to the one we're working on. Next tutorial, I'm going to go over local adjustments to really make our portrait pop.